Hey everyone, and a really warm welcome to today's Explainer. I'm absolutely thrilled to guide you through this flipped learning session, especially all of you high-attaining A-level psychology students out there. Right, before we jump in, just a quick reminder to make sure your subtitles are turned on. Our slides are specifically designed to be dyslexia-friendly, and they work perfectly alongside the text. Today, we're tackling a genuinely fascinating AQA specification point, Baillargeon's explanation of early infant abilities. We're going to be focusing specifically on what infants actually know about the physical world. All right, let's dive right into it.
Here's our roadmap for today. We'll kick things off with a knowledge bridge, then move into our AO1 core explanation, look at some AO2 applications, and tackle the AO3 evaluation. After that, we'll wrap the whole thing up with a stretch challenge, a quick quiz, and a practical summary. Okay, let's get started.
Section 1, the knowledge bridge. Let's just briefly activate your prior learning to set the perfect stage for René Baillargeon.
To really frame this whole debate, we need to quickly look back at Piaget's theory of cognitive development. You'll probably remember that Piaget argued infants don't actually achieve object permanence until they're around 18 to 24 months old. And why did he think that? Well, largely because his hiding tasks required an active search. The babies literally had to physically lift a cloth or reach out for an object. But here's where Baillargeon comes in and completely challenges that timeline. She proposed that Piaget, well, he kind of confused a lack of motor skills with a lack of understanding. Think about it. If a baby can't physically reach for something, does that actually mean they don't know it's there? So Baillargeon shifted the whole methodology to measuring visual attention, specifically looking time. And doing this revealed that early physical knowledge is actually present way earlier, as early as 3 to 4 months. So the absolute crucial takeaway here is this massive shift from measuring performance, what they can physically do, to measuring competence, which is what they actually understand.
Section 2, AO1 Core Explanation. Let's get right into the core material and break down Baillargeon's key concepts.
All right, here is our first key term, the violation of expectation, or VOE paradigm. Guys, this is the absolute cornerstone of Baillargeon's methodology. Instead of asking a baby to reach out and grab something, the VOE method just presents infants with two types of events. First, a possible event that obeys normal physical laws, and second, an impossible event that literally violates them. Like, imagine a solid object just passing right through a solid wall. Now, if the infants look significantly longer at that impossible event, researchers infer that they're surprised. That longer looking time strongly suggests they already possess built-in expectations about physical reality. By measuring looking time instead of active searching, we completely bypass the need for any complex motor responses. And that is huge because it allows us to test infants who are as young as 3 months old.
Moving on, here's our second key term, the physical reasoning system, or PRS. Baillargeon basically proposed that we are absolutely not born as blank slates. Nope. Instead, infants possess this innate physical reasoning system, like a built-in mental mechanism that equips them to interpret physical events right from day one. But, and this is important, it's not totally fixed. It gets refined over time. So infants start out with very broad general rules, like, unsupported objects will definitely fall. But then, as they actually gain physical experience in the world, they start adding complex variables into the system, learning exactly how much support a specific object needs so it stays balanced.
Okay, let's look at the actual empirical evidence. Watch how I break this down by study, focus, and findings. First up, Baillargeon's famous 1987 rotating screen study, which focused on object continuity. She showed 3.5-month-olds, a screen rotating backward, kind of like a drawbridge. In the impossible condition, it appeared to pass straight through a solid box. And guess what? The infant stared significantly longer at this, proving they fully expected the screen to stop. Next, Baillargeon and Hanko Summers in 1990 looked at support events. They found that 6-month-olds stared way longer when a box appeared to just magically float unsupported off the edge of a platform. Finally, Hespos and Baillargeon in 2001 looked at containment. Here, infants clearly expected containers to limit where an object could move, and they were visibly surprised if an object somehow escaped a totally solid container. All three of these studies robustly demonstrate early physical knowledge in action.
And all of these findings provide the essential foundation for core knowledge theory. This theory argues that infants are born with domain-specific systems for reasoning. We're talking about dedicated systems for objects, agents, number, and space. Baillargeon's research provides the massive empirical backbone specifically for that objects component we just mentioned, proving beyond a doubt that infants have an innate grasp of solidity, continuity, and cohesion.
Section 3, AO2 Application.
So how does all this theory actually apply to real-world infant behaviors? Let's take a look. If you ever watched a baby looking at an older sibling doing a simple magic trick, like throwing a blanket over a toy and pretending it's vanished, you'll notice the baby just stares with these massive, wide eyes. Now, parents often think this is just random fascination, but applying Baillargeon's theory, we know exactly what's going on here. The infant is staring because the event literally violates their physical reasoning system. They actually have an early conceptual understanding of object solidity and continuity. They know objects just can't vanish into thin air, even if they completely lack the physical motor skills to crawl over there and yank the blanket off to check for themselves. Here's another really brilliant AO2 application, edge safety. Caregivers often notice that babies get very hesitant around the edges of changing tables or staircases, long before they've ever taken a fall or even understand words about danger. And why is that? Well, just as Baillargeon's 1990 study on support events showed, by 6 months old, infants already have an intuitive expectation about gravity and stability. When an object, or say their own body, teeters on an edge without enough contact, it instantly triggers heightened attention. They intuitively expect that unsupported things are going to fall.
Now watch how I break this down step by step for a research methods-linked AO2 exam question. Say you get a question like, explain one methodological advantage of using looking time in infant research. Okay, step 1. You identify that looking time is the primary dependent variable in the violation of expectation method. Step 2. You contrast this directly with Piaget's methods, which, as we know, relied heavily on motor skills like reaching. And step 3, you conclude that looking time is a much more sensitive measure. Why? Because it accurately isolates cognitive competence from physical performance, which is exactly what allows us to test pre-verbal, pre-crawling infants.
Section 4, AO3 Evaluation. All right, it is time to critically weigh up the strengths and limitations of Baillargeon's theory. Let's really weigh up this critical debate. On the strength side, Baillargeon's highly sensitive methodology successfully avoids the confounding variable of motor demands. Plus, her findings have incredibly strong empirical support across multiple domains, like occlusion and support. And to top it off, it's actually backed by modern neuroimaging, specifically fNIRS, which physically shows brain activity related to prediction errors when babies view impossible events. Pretty cool, right? But on the flip side, some researchers argue her interpretation of looking time is, well, highly questionable. I mean, are they actually surprised or just visually interested? Secondly, critics suggest she really underestimates perceptual learning. Maybe babies just learn these rules super fast in their first few months rather than being born with them. Finally, let's be honest, floating boxes and magic screens are highly artificial, meaning these studies arguably lack real ecological validity.
To secure those highest bands in your AQA exams, you absolutely must make synoptic and debate links. So here is your synoptic link to biopsychology. The rapid synaptogenesis in the visual cortex and parietal lobes between 3 to 12 months perfectly supports infants' ability to mentally process occlusion and continuity. This basically validates the looking time methodology on a neurobiological level. And for issues and debates, this topic sits right at the heart of the classic nature versus nurture debate. Baillargeon's core knowledge theory argues for innate, nature-driven cognitive structures. Meanwhile, critics argue from a nurture perspective, stating that these abilities simply emerge through rapid perceptual and statistical learning right from their environment.
Let's do a really quick AO3 misconception check. A very common error I see is students stating that longer looking time is absolute proof of deep, complex understanding. Guys, it is not. Please remind yourselves that this is a hotly debated inference. Critics fiercely argue that babies might stare longer simply because an impossible event is visually novel, or maybe it just triggers an interesting perceptual preference. It doesn't automatically mean they have a sophisticated cognitive schema of physics. It's absolutely vital you maintain that critical nuance in your essays.
Section 5. Stretch and quiz. Let's push your synoptic thinking a bit before we test your retention.
Here are 2 high-level conceptual prompts for you to reflect on. Now, you don't need to answer these right now, just let them simmer in your mind. First, how exactly does limited motor cortex development physically obscure early cognitive schemas in Piaget's testing? And second, could cognitive information processing models, which, remember, focus on processing capacity rather than just age, could they actually bridge the theoretical gap between Piaget and Baillargeon? Think about it.
Okay, let's test what we've covered today. AO1 Short Quiz. Question 1. What does the violation of expectation paradigm measure to infer infant knowledge? Feel free to pause the explainer for a second if you need to. All right, the answer is looking time. Moving to question 2, an AO2 application. According to Baillargeon, why does an infant stare when an older sibling performs a simple magic trick? Again, pause if you need a moment. The answer is because the magic violates their physical reasoning system, specifically their innate expectation of object solidity and continuity.
Finally, question 3, an AO3 evaluation. What is a major methodological limitation regarding the impossible events used in VOE studies? Pause to think about it. And the answer is, they often have low ecological validity, simply because floating boxes and disappearing screens are highly artificial and don't really resemble natural, real-world physical interactions. Really excellent work if you got those right.
Section 6, Practical Study Summary. Let's look at how you could actually investigate this whole concept yourselves.
To truly grasp these research methods, here is a really simple, ethical, practical study you can carry out if you happen to have access to a baby in your family. Step 1. Design a simple support impossible event. For example, a box that is secretly attached to a wall so it appears to be floating completely unsupported off a table. Step 2. Show it to the infant, making sure you have clear parental consent, of course. Step 3. Video record their reaction and code the dependent variable, which is the duration of their looking time, comparing it to a control trial where the box is fully supported. Doing this really makes the methodology completely concrete for you. And that brings us to the very end of our explainer. I recommend leaving this summary up to review the crucial key terms in the AO1, AO2, and AO3 breakdown we've covered today. Remember, Baillargeon fundamentally shifted psychology by successfully separating cognitive competence from physical performance. She showed us that babies know way more than we ever thought, long before they can actually tell us. Thank you so much for your hard work and focus today. Keep those subtitles on, review your notes, and I'm going to leave you with this final, provocative thought. If infants are truly born with an innate understanding of physics, what other incredibly complex knowledge might already be hardwired into our brains the exact moment we are born? Something to think about. See you in the next session.